Welcome to everybody to Laboral Center of Art and Industrial Creation in Gijón, Asturias. We celebrate today our afternoon session focusing on art, science, technology, and society. That is the WinterLAB 2020. The topic of arts, neuroscience, and health is the main focus that is going to be addressed by the roundtable. Will be chaired by the PhD, Luz González-Arias, who is a professor of English Philology at the University of Oviedo, and she's director of the research group HIL on health, environment, art, and literature. Also, she's the main researcher of the research project Development and Innovation, aims thesis in the age of distinction and Anglo-Saxon narratives, funded by the Ministry of Science and Innovation. Welcome, Luz Mar González-Arias, and thank you very much for being here, and I hope you enjoy the afternoon. Thank you very much. I'd like to start by thanking very much Laboral for having invited me to be here to join WinterLAB and participate in WinterLAB, which is an exhibition on art and neuroscience that will be here in Laboral until the end of April. And also congratulations to Karen as curator and all her team for having set up such a beautiful exhibition and all the efforts invested. No? Well, the roundtable, we are going to start now in the next minutes on art, neuroscience, and health. It is a beautiful example of the diversified possibilities that open up when there is a crossroads of disciplines that used to be traditionally separated from each other, as it happens with the health sciences, arts, and artistic creation or research on art or humanities. There is a crossroad of disciplines that results in an explosion of perspectives that sum up and never are in detriment of each other. When we talk about health or disease, well, these topics are very relevant this time of the pandemic, COVID-19. When we talk about health or disease, the conversation has to open up to as many players as possible from different disciplines, because art may feed from research and scientific research, and this exhibition illustrates that. And science may become something different or even take it to another level to try to reach other audiences. And also from research, scientific research, we can use art for different issues. For example, as a therapy or research, more academic research, if you wish. People here at the round table at this meeting are a good example of that crossroads of disciplines. 3 of them are artists. Their work is included in this exhibition. And we also have a neuroscientist, and I want to talk to them and discuss together, exchange opinions on the applications of art on health therapies, for example, or the applications to generate social empathy in those people who suffer from neural disorders or any other kind of disease. A critic we can also perform through art to criticize the life models we have in Western societies and how they may cause a negative impact on health. And also talk about scientific research, neuroscience, and the marriage of this research branch. So I have the pleasure to share this roundtable this afternoon with Daniel Canogar, here to my left. He starts his professional life and artistic life in Spain and United States. He started working in photography, and then all of a sudden he started to look into the artistic expressions, installations. He has exhibited his work in many areas to the other side of the ocean. Next to him, we have Miguel Angel Rego, also to my left, and his professional life also illustrates that hybrid nature of disciplines. He's a PhD at the University Complutense of Madrid. He also studied technical engineering, systems computing, and he has also exhibited his works in many places, for example, Mosaic of Leon, Impact Festival, Utrecht. He has also exhibited in London and also here in Laboral. In Wien, we have Emanuel Gollob. He has a degree in research of design at the University of Applied Arts of Wien. He's at the other side of the screen. Some of his recent projects, we have a work that is at the Pavilion of Austria Expo, or was 2017, Kazakhstan, and he has a work called Robot Doing Nothing, exhibited in Ars Electronica Festival also in 2017, and an exhibition Error in Berlin, 2018-2019. And then to my right, we have the PhD Jorge Arias Perez, who is director of the Institute of Neuroscience of the Principality of Asturias, and he also chaired the university in psychobiology, University of Oviedo. He leads the group of research neuroscience of behavior. He has, many publications on these topics. He has led up to 18 PhD works focused on neuroscience. So with this fantastic group of experts, I'd like to start this conversation. Daniel, you work focusing on memory, the loss of memory. You say, and I quote, if we did not have memories, we would condemned to a present lacking of time, meaning you use some obsolete technologies and the object, you pose it beyond the physical matter, something, the object that carries away some of our memories. So art can be used, for example, music, for some therapies to reactivate some activities, therapies, for example, to cure or to treat Alzheimer even patients, no? And I'd like to talk to you about this therapeutic role of art for artists and for the patient. And do we run the risk of art being instrumentalized? What do you think about these topics? Well, thank you, Luz Maria. I believe there is not just one single use of art. The good thing about art is that it accepts all kind of approaches, different art creation methodologies, and there is a branch that is called art and therapy that is very important. There are even some university degrees, with the main focus on this issue. Any artistic process has a therapeutic component. And of course, if I had not had it with me for all my life, I would not be here. So it's not that I have faced many tragedies, but at some points I have kind of got hold of art to try to give sense to my life and my relationship with the world in all the chaos and or the events that may happen in your life, no? Art, for me, furthermore, yes, there is a component of processing, inner processing. We have a huge problem in this society. We are bombarded with information daily, and therefore, we are in a kind of a state of distraction. We cannot absorb. Our sensorial capacity does not have the capacity, so to say, to absorb all the information that we get every day. And I think art is a fundamental tool for us to process in our cycle, in our brain, the events, the information. There are trauma events, dramatic events, others not so traumatic, but art helps us give a response to position ourselves now when facing those dramas. And also, I think it is very important to pay attention, to raise awareness. I have discovered that paying attention makes you really happy. when talking about therapy, because usually this kind of internal dialogue that we have in our heads is full of many things, statistical data. 80% of the thoughts are negative thoughts. Well, in fact, that internal dialogue that has to do with, I have to go to the chemist to pick up this drug, they sent me the wrong invoice, that guy is a fucking bastard because he did this or said this to me. And then we have Instagram and Facebook and all the news 24 hours 7. It's impossible. You have to stop and pay attention. Calm down. Just pay attention to the moment. And the feeling is incredible. You start to pay attention to tiny, tiny details that you had it in front of your nose before, but you had never really paid attention to it. You start to identify the light, or you touch the trunk of a tree and you can feel the trunk of the tree. They are beautiful moments. And I think artists are now paying attention to our reality. And with the finger, we are also saying, look at this. Because it was something obvious nobody saw, and it is difficult to materialize. It is difficult to make it tangible so that the others cognitively can process something that is very specific and is in front of us. Anyhow, I think that art plays many roles, different roles. Also, it can do many things. So you have to use it as you wish or as you should. Obviously, children, we have all been, as kids, have been artists. And unfortunately, as we grow older, we lose that artistic nature. So we have to come back to our childhood. And they know how to use art to process their environment. And then we should use it as well as adults. And as I was mentioning, it has been a tool that has always been with me, next to me, and has also helped me give sense to my life. Yes, because the fact is that art is a way to turn pain into something different, no? And that fact of paying attention, not to something, to be in the present, in the moment, in the now. Sometimes we're in the past, or we are sometimes thinking of the future, no, that may or may not happen. Yeah, and also think there is a kind of a subconscious component, no? It is also present in all artistic projects. Some components that do not come from any logic or rational space, and however, they feed us and they inform our experience, our perspective. As many other artists, we are interested in the world of dreams, no? The oniric world. It is also related to the brain activity. Each mind has its own therapeutic order, so to speak, no? To try to organize a series of events that have happened to you the previous day. And then you also have the personal fear, as you mentioned at the beginning, no? The fear of losing your memory. I have always had a good memory, above all visual memory. For example, today, when I was coming from my hotel to here to Laboral, I have tried to come without Google Maps because I got so much used to Google Maps, no? To follow up technology. And I am a little bit afraid that maybe at some point my brain loses the map, not the geographical map. As an artist working with technology, I have to be careful. I love technology, it's my passion, but obviously there are components that are harmful, no? They are bad for my health. For example, problems with my wrist because I use the mouse too much, my neck also sometimes suffers pain, and also the loss of memory because of the excess of bombardment. No, I am an addict to news and the press, and that is affecting my memory. And the fact of losing your memory is like losing the notion of who you are. And through my artistic projects, I try somehow not to forget who I am. Okay, so that is part of my aim or my methodology, working methodology, no? Memory of technologies that we have always used. The installation I have exhibited here, semantic passage, they are electrical wires, telephone wires or computing cables, all of them that were found at the scrap shop, a local scrap shop, and I try to recover their memory, the energy that once traveled through those wires and cables, because somehow we also project things on the objects that surround us. And I also want to try to identify that idea, no, of the memory of the objects we have created. Yes. I think the immersive installation in that neuron that you have at the exhibition, well, should be visited. Miguel Angel, I also wanted to talk to you about these topics. In your work, you focus on mental disease, different kind of neural pathologies, for example, aphasia, anosognosia, and your inspiration was Messinger's quote that transparency is a type of darkness. In your work, you show that darkness, it is a neural activity we do not have access to somehow. You are showing how all perception is kind of subjective, all vision is subjective, but above all, you are showing us different ways of perceiving the world from a mind that's suffering from these neural pathologies or diseases or disorders. I wanted to ask you whether you think art, or I wanted to deepen in the social role of art beyond the artistic role, no, or aesthetic role. Anyone who visits your piece of work will see it, no, aesthetically it's brilliant, but it can also help us empathize with other different ways of perceiving the world. Sometimes we are not aware of that, no? Yes, well, thank you very much for the introduction. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Laboral for the invitation. And thank you very much to all the technicians that have also made possible and Laboral team. I'm going to try to reply to your question by means of images that I have brought with me. When soul butterflies flap their wings, which is the name of the exhibition, I presented several projects. The first of them would focus. Could we please move on to the next slide? Next. Thank you. The first of them, post-contingent coherence. Well, I will go back a little bit in time to say that these two projects I am exhibiting is a part of a trilogy of works to focusing on rare pathologies. In each of the works, I focus on one of the pathologies. I do not like the term pathologies. I prefer to use the term variations that happen in your brain. But precisely that one that inspired me most is not represented in any of these works. It is the syndrome of Tourette. I started to read on this syndrome through Oliver Sacks, some of his articles and texts, but above all, thanks to a documentary he made. He starts to establish a dialogue with a person who is suffering from this syndrome and to see how he interacts with the world, no? His everyday life, the everyday life of this patient, as it is a neuropsychological disease or disorder. I was interested in the fact of how this person, through certain activities, for example, karate, martial arts. So for those of you who don't know anything about this syndrome, those people who suffer this syndrome cannot control movements, the spasms, or they also, convey messages in an involuntary way. So through martial arts or karate, they can go into a kind of a pleasant state. But also this person plays the piano and also paints. And what I was interested in was not only how these kind of activities may take us to a kind of a pleasant state, but I also wanted to link it to the human universalism. So these neural pathologies are not manifestations, in my opinion, that harm a certain number of people, but rather they harm all the society. Okay, so but however, in these kind of people, it is a bit more accentuated, let's say. In my opinion, the agnosognosia, I focus on the first piece of work. Agnosognosia is a pathology that makes you deny other kind of pathologies the person is suffering from. So in this work, we see a piano player from the first point of view, and the third person point of view. She denies the disease, getting hold of the left hand and just playing the piano. Agnosognosia, I think, causes harm to us all as soon as you deny part of the reality. This has been subject to studies, and trials and clinical studies, how the vestibular system is implied in that negation at some point, or some events that may be very tragic. The vestibular system acts on all of us to deny certain events, certain reality events, to be able to survive. Okay, it is a kind of a survival tool, let's say. The second piece of work, can we move on to the next slide, please? So here you have soliloquium. I also focus on one of those pathologies, that is the visual agnosia. You cannot recognize the faces of the relatives or friends, and you need to get hold of other senses to acknowledge them, to recognize them. We are all that kind of patient. As Daniel mentioned before, memory acts as a filter. Okay, it maintains, it retains information, and other information is just in a latency state. Okay, so this can be represented in these kind of pathologies, and in these people it is more accentuated again. And that is, well, what I wanted to illustrate with my work. It is fascinating, Miguel, thank you very much, how we perceive the world, and how reality as such is just an abstraction independently of any neural alteration or no, or whether we have a brain that works quote unquote as a healthy brain, from a neural standpoint. Everything is subjective. I'd now like to talk to Emanuel Gollob. He's on the other side of the screen. He's in Wien. Emmanuel, well, his inspiration was Alice Carring's book, The Body in Pain. It's one of the first texts that we read, those of us who look into medical humanities. It focuses on disease and the capacity of pain to break with linguistic articulation, so to speak. In Emanuel Gollob's work, you can see what we consider the condition of being healthy or being ill. He has been very critical with this accelerated pace that we have here in the Western world, in contemporary societies. This is linked to what Daniel mentioned, this acceleration that invites to production, hyperproduction, superproduction of activity instead of reflection. And one of his pieces of work, as the one that he exhibits here, is better just to do nothing, okay? And that is a kind of a dignification of reflexive life. Yeah, Emmanuel, I wanted to ask you, how could we reflect, or what do you think as an artist about the time that we are facing right now, where lockdowns have obliged us to slow down our lives. But on the other hand, we are hyper-connected with technology now, and we are working many more hours now than we used to do, no? So what is the impact on mental health and physical health, but also the health of the planet, no? And this accelerated pace, no? This rhythm, yeah? What do you think?
I think as acceleration is happening in this lockdown, we're like, physically we're locked down, but as you said, we are by being connected all the time, we are actually at the same time accelerating. And it definitely has an impact on us. And I think as our brains is a living structure and we are constantly adapting to a changing context, we are already adapting to this changing context as well. And I think that also leads to my project, Doing Nothing with AI, because the main inspiration for doing nothing with AI in the beginning was that I realized that my ability to do nothing is changing because I'm constantly, I'm flooded with information, I'm flooded with being connected all the time. And then I started to reflect for myself about how my brain is adapting to this changing environment and how this relates to digitalization in general. And I very much came to this point that I do not want to romanticize something, but I could say that, I don't know, 50 years ago, we had more time to pay deep attention and we had more time than to actually do nothing. But at the same time, we don't know if maybe it could be way more inspiring and it could be also way more reflective to live in a world where we are just trained to be on sequence tasking and doing nothing at the same time while we are doing something. So for me, it's not so much about judging, but about realizing that this by giving ourselves or by placing ourselves in such a context of technological digitalization, but at the same time in an accelerated world, that we actually reshape ourselves constantly.
Sí, porque además esto de no hacer nada.
Yes, because they think about doing nothing. Well, doing nothing, what is the meaning of doing nothing? To be reflecting, to be thinking, to be dreaming is doing nothing, even when we do not have any kind of physical activity, or apparently at least we do not have it. We have a brain activity, right? And we have dreams, what we mentioned before. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And I also wanted to talk to my colleague from the University of Oviedo, Jorge Arias, a neuroscientist. I think he was very much involved in this exhibition. And we've had many meetings on the confluence between neuroscience and art. I'd like to ask him what his experience was like in this process of thinking about this exhibition and how art may be useful or may contribute to scientific research. What do you think, Jorge?
Good afternoon. As I was saying, we have seen that from the scientific point of view. For me, it has been an excellent experience. And I was delighted to be able to have these conversations and to be able to pose questions and to try to understand how people were interpreting that neuroscience. However, what I want to say is that in the end, after the talks and the conversations that we held, I saw that science and art are fully intertwined. In the scientific field, I'm always advocating multidisciplinarity because I need physics, I need virologists, I need pharmacologists, and I'm always asking for those people to interact with me. And artists do exactly the same and need exactly the same. They need interactions. And art and science and art are a continuum. Really, we have creativity, we have information, and for me it was striking because the way in which they present and approach their work is an internalization of something that they are thinking about, and from that internalization they get something different, and that is really amazing. And when I face a challenge or a problem in neuroscience, I could perhaps use that approach. I can perhaps tackle problems from different points of view. I should use creativity to be able to address problems from different sides. And I saw it exactly the same way. We have an approach and then a presentation. So the same problem, the same issue can be handled from different perspectives. And if you present an artwork, another artist will have a different approach, will have a different consequence out of it. And for me, it has been an excellent experience, and I would love to have other experiences. I would like them to go to my lab every now and then and to feed me back with the creative approaches. And they can also give us ideas about how we can tackle research projects. We sometimes hold seminars every fortnight, and I invite my students to go to those research seminars. We present what we are doing, what data we are obtaining, and what that makes us think. And you always have people that say, I cannot go because I am not going to contribute anything. And I say, everyone can contribute something because you have a more alert mind perhaps than mine, or at least a fresher approach. And I think that's exactly what happens with artists. They give us new points of view. Yes, interdisciplinarity and collaboration between different areas is the path that we should follow. I don't know if it's happening to you when you see the COVID news. I look at the COVID images, the drawings. I always look at the aesthetic component of the virus. It's always attractive, the aesthetics, the forms, the shapes. And this exhibition is exactly a presentation of that, because scientific that comes to the exhibition, they will see some apparel and some devices that remind you of a lab. And in the same way, it is also an artwork. It's a type of art that really crosses borders, the borders that we were discussing at the beginning. I don't know if I have time, or I have a few more questions to ask you. So I wanted to ask you regarding everything that Jorge has just said, and also regarding artists. I would like to start with the artists. When you create one of those artworks, Miguel Angel or Miguel Angel or Daniel or Emmanuel, you have a research, first of all, an academic research. Then there is a reading of scientific literature. And my question is, to what extent, up until what, to what extent can that slow down the creative process? We need that research, but at the same time, we can perhaps interfere with the creative process that is perhaps a more type of improvisation, and that can come from different parts of the brain. So when do you say, this is enough, I don't want to read anymore, and I have to start, or perhaps you decide that you need more inspiration? How do you decide that? Daniel? Oh, okay, I will start by answering the question. For me, theoretical research has always been one of the foundations of my whole life, not just my artistic career. But I got to a point where my interest in research as such, in trials, I had forgotten the book, Body in Pain. It was like an earthquake for me, intellectually speaking. It was a wonderful book. Anyway, with time, I have come to realize that I need to keep reading and looking for inspiration, that inspirational reading. I don't do it that much. I'm becoming more brutal lately. But I know that it is very important because it is like a fire that is in the background and that is cooking your ideas while you are doing something different. But when I start working on a project, on a new project, I normally tend to forget about all that. Or at least it is my way of working. Those readings, those conversations, those ideas are there. But if I start to process everything and use them to process everything, perhaps I get stuck. So if I work too literally with those theoretical reflections and thoughts, they become something perhaps too didactic or illustrative. That is even worse, I guess. What I have come to discover is that art has to be very free. Of course, this is a commonplace, but art does not necessarily have to serve a purpose. Sometimes doing nothing is fine. I do transcendental meditation. I have been practicing that for the last 5 years, and that has changed my life. Those are 2 moments in the day that I do nothing, and it is really very difficult to come to do nothing, but it is one of the most productive things I do throughout the day. And in that sense, art has that aspect or that element. It does not necessarily have a purpose. It should not contribute something specifically. It contributes something different. It answers other questions that you might perhaps not come up with, are not the ones that you have posed, are not your field of research. At least that's how I work, but I know that there are many different approaches, and that's what I like about art. There are many different ways to work, and they are all free. There are as many as people practicing art or as artists. And I know that it is important to continue to reflect, to think, to read, but I prefer to leave it aside. What you have said about not doing anything, it reminds me a quote by Paula Meehan, an Irish poet, one of the most important voices in her generation. She used to say that poets, and that can be made extensive to artists, are the dreamers of culture, professional dreamers of culture, and they should perhaps claim dignifying living conditions or even a salary, because that is something that can be helpful at some point when we are in pain, when we are going through a dark period of our lives. Perhaps I need a poem because my father has just died, and if poets cannot create because they didn't have a way to dream and to not do anything, it would be impossible to read that poem. So not doing anything from the point of view of society perhaps is, from a capitalistic point of view, is not right, but it is. What's your opinion, Miguel Angel, about that relationship between research and artistic creation? Because you are a professor at university, you are a researcher, an investigator, you are working on your PhD thesis. Do you find problems to relate those two activities? No, I'm not a professor yet. I'm a practicing professor, but yes, due to the context, I'm doing my PhD thesis at the philosophy school, and I, of course, read a lot. I use reading a lot, not so much because of the context, but because the topics that I'm dealing with, like perceptual disorders, require a special degree of care. Those are complex topics, and I try to be as careful and respectful as possible. It is true that those are topics that I address because I have one of those disorders in a very mild degree, but that was my entry point, that's why I started to research the Gilles de syndrome. But I agree with Daniel, and I'm envious of him because what he just said about the closed mind of the laboratory, I try to strike a balance there. To look for a common ground, although I tend to leave aside inspiration or improvisation, and I tend to read more, just the opposite of what he said. That happens to him. But we all need those texts and that information in order to be able to work with it. We have all that research that is part of our background, and we carry it around. But in my case, I try to delve deeper into those topics because I want to be as respectful as possible to the topics that I approach. From a universal point of view, it is interesting to work on those areas as well, because we work with marginalization, inclusion. Yeah, of course, I fully agree. What's your opinion, Emmanuel, about that? In your work, you also have interdisciplinarity. And do you think those pieces of research, the technical and scientific, do they influence your creative process? Do they speed up your process, or do they slow it down? What's your opinion? I don't know, Emmanuel, if you are listening. Can you hear us, Manuel? Otherwise, we can go on to Jorge.
Thank you for the question.
Vale, gracias.
Vale, okay. Yeah, it's also for me very important, and I think for me the art process already starts when the exchange starts with other disciplines. And for me it's also very important to make art projects which are not only relevant to people interested in art, but which also are accessible for visitors with other backgrounds. Because I think in the end, if I'm really taking serious what I'm working on, I want it to be that it touches people not only in my own bubble, but from all kind of different backgrounds. And then when going through the process, it's like iterating from a phase where it's a very tense exchange with experts, scientists, technologists, and then also a phase where it's very like I try to isolate myself and I just try to improvise and then bring it back to the experts I'm working with.
Muchas gracias, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Jorge, when you attend, we have to be very brief because we don't have much time, but when you attend an exhibition such as this one, what do you feel offended if you see something that is not right or that is wrong, or do you think that this is another way of understanding art? As there's an acceleration and everything is very fast. Society is changing so much and the brain is adapting all the time. That adaptation has a representation and the artists, I have many friends who are artists, and I think this is exactly the same. If I read an article, a paper that I have written, after some time I normally read it and I say, wow, I shouldn't have written that there. And I'm sure that the same is happening. Plasticity, the brain plasticity makes us change our mind every day, and artists should do exactly the same. We have to keep growing all the time. Otherwise we are stuck, we are there. Art is not static. Thank you very much. Thank you to our fellow panelists. This is no void rhetoric. It is really captivating to listen to you, and I hope this is the start of future collaborations and conversations. And I would also like to thank Laboral for organizing this WinterLAB and this beautiful exhibition that I'm sure will be very stimulating for everyone that can come and watch it. Thank you very much.